Welcome back to Cards and Comics, guys. Today I want to have a little discussion, a little update on, what I'm doing from a collecting perspective, and just a little chat about where I'm at right now as the National is quickly approaching, and what am I going to be focused on for the remainder of the year as a collector, because you can see from my channel, I'm more of a collecting-based channel, but I have opinions, and I'll talk about things from time to time. Today, I want to talk about a decision that, personally, for me as a collector, to get back to what I'm calling my core, the things I began collecting, many, many years ago, what started me on this journey. And I kind of veered away from that in my journey. And everyone changes as they collect. They have different interests. Things come and go. So that's not really a problem. But what I'm going to talk about a little bit is almost like kind of like burnout, or switching from collecting for reasons that probably aren't the greatest, because there's some good and bad about change, and I'll talk about the good and bad in a minute. I'll give you a quick update about just what's going on with me. Some folks who are, listeners of the channel, I just came back from Germany. I will be traveling again, probably internationally a couple more times this year, and then many other travel trips. So I'll try to, just have fun, travel, and give updates from wherever I'm at. I did a little update from Germany. I thought that was kind of fun. And my very hot hotel room, like 90 degrees in there with no air conditioning. Other updates on the just where I'm at is, from a family perspective, my daughter just had surgery in her knee. She hurt it in soccer. She dislocated her kneecap, and she's going to be out for the next 4 months, rehabbing and getting it ready so she can get back on the soccer field. So I went with her today to the hospital to have surgery. It took about 8 hours from beginning to end to what time we left to the time we got her home. And it was a pretty rough surgery, in terms of just how much they had to do. So, that's one of those things you hate to do, is see your kids in pain. But overall, this will be a good thing for her to get that fixed. On a little bit more sad note than my daughter's surgery is, I think we have a little dog, and I don't think he's going to make it. I think he's got some neurological issues, and that's going to be one of the things that we'll have to be dealing with the next couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of days. So it's kind of sad from the family perspective when these things happen. It's a second family pet that we will end up having to probably have to put down, and for very similar issues as well. So I'm just kind of a little unlucky, but he lived a good life, a long life. So I don't think it's as tragic as our first family pet. But, with kids, this is a really tough thing to deal with. So I've got one daughter who just had surgery and is out for, at least 6 weeks non-weight bearing. Can't play sports, can't do anything. And now we're going to have to maybe put down a family pet. So not a fun thing as a family to deal with all at once. So we're dealing through that. But back on the topic of today, the whole getting back to the core of collecting. So I want to show you what sets I collected as part of the set registry. So here are my sets that I started, some cases when the set registry first started. I actually started when the registry started. I was one of the early adopters, because when I first started collecting seriously, really when I got out of college, and I always had goals for collecting. I wanted to complete something, and being competitive, just as a person. The registry was really fun because you could rank, have a checklist. It was more interactive. So I really was a big set registry guy at the beginning, but then it kind of fell off for me for a lot of reasons. But the first thing I want to talk about is just the sets I had. So you can see the focus in my collection has always been very heavily based in Pirates, Stargell, Clemente, Pirate team sets, Mazeroski, and the Tip Top Red. So a lot of the stuff is Pirates. The thing that came on later was Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. That actually came on much later in my collecting journey. And Chief Bender was in the last 5 or 6 years I started collecting Chief Bender. So it's not I would call like my core. It wasn't what I started doing. So along the way, a couple of things happened. When I first started collecting, I was only about, at first, Clemente and my 61 Pirate team set. It's all I really cared about. I mean, it was all about that. Any card I had that was not those players, Clemente or the 61 Tops team set, I just traded, sold to get cards that I needed for my Clemente and Pirate team set. Then pretty early on, I also added Stargell Maz to my list of players to collect. And for a lot of years, I would say from probably 1997, 98 to at least 2005, around 2005 to 2007. That's all I really collected. Any other cards I had were just either I got them through trades or through means, but they were always there. Maybe I got a good deal on a card, and I knew I would sell or trade it for another pirate card I needed, and that's what I did for a lot of years. Really, I actually until about 2010, I'd say. So that's a lot of years to just collect a couple players and one team set. And in 2010, 2009, 2010 is when I got into modern cards again, with Strasburg, Harper, Mike Trout, kind of all in a row. And that really derailed my collecting a little bit because I had started all these team sets or all these sets on the registry, and I was just really trying to get them completed. And when you look at my completion percentage, you're probably wondering like what the heck happened. We'll talk about that in a second. And why I don't do the registry as much anymore. But that really derailed my collecting interest, and I will give you some real reasons why. Number one, when I would set up or go to card shows, at that time it's just as a collector, not as a dealer yet, just as a collector. When you have a box full of cards that you're looking to sell, trade, to trade up, I was doing lots of trading up. That's how I built my collection. I would just trade up. I would get a couple of cards of my players, and then I would sell a few of them, and then buy a bigger card. So I would have a 68 or 69 Clemente, trade, sell them, and get a 65. Then take the 65 and my 72 and sell and get the 63. And then I would go back and get the 68, 69 again. It's like there was cards I could afford and could replace, and there was cards I would bundle and trade to get a bigger card. And then I was always chasing the 50s cards, so the 57, the 58, the 56, my whole life. I mean, the rookie card, right? That was always the big winners for me as a collector for all those years. So this trade up to get the big card and start the process all over again. And that's how I got a majority of my Clemente cards I have today. Is I started with a bunch of 60s and 70s cards, and then traded up and started all over again. And that's how I built my collection. So I did that for a lot of years. But what started happening was going to shows, people just weren't interested in just Clemente's, Maz cards, or Stargell cards. And it was like my collection was so narrow focused that it really, it was hard to do those deals later on. Because if a dealer was, I already have Clemente, I don't have, do you have any of these players, or do you have any of these new guys, these hot guys, do you have anything else besides these three guys? And I may have had a few cards, but not many of other players. And then again, I got interested in modern cards, and then as a fluke, I kind of set up at a card show, met some friends who were set up there, or people who became friends, and they had these very diverse collections as well, and they were dealers, and they had this inventory of cards that I didn't have, and so I kind of thought I need to diversify. I need to get other cards. I need to get other players. And that's really what started the whole thing is, the modern cards along with this kind of setting up as a dealer and diversifying. And that really just derailed my Clemente collection big time. And there were some other key events such as the 68 3D, fiascos that I went through that kind of soured me on the master set for Clemente. Which I don't even have one registered anymore. Again, I'll talk about the registry in a second. Um, and that's really, what killed my desire for uh, just continuing on with my sets. I just thought, I'm going to set up as a dealer. I'm going to do this every month. I got to have better inventory, and so I just was focused on that for a lot of years. And so everything became secondary. But also, what happened to kind of also push me in that direction big time was the registry side of it became really difficult. Um, I had, when you buy and sell, like I was doing trading up, you list cards in your inventory, then you have to delete them, put other cards in your registry. And what was happening was there were so many cards coming in and out of my sets that it just became such a hard thing to get. And then the cards I was sometimes getting were in other people's sets, and you had to submit and take photos and do some things to get your cards registered. And it became such a hassle, and I was moving through cards so quickly, that I just didn't keep up with it. And then when I went back and tried to register a lot of my cards, once I got kind of more established, in my collection, I wasn't trading up as much. Like a third of the cards I couldn't register anymore because they were in other registry sets. And then they had this thing where you couldn't register a card in more than one set for a while, I believe. And so there was like, well, it was already in another set, and I couldn't put it in. I couldn't, I had, let's say a basic set and a basic top set, and then you had the master set. And that just, I didn't like that because, like I didn't want to buy three versions of one card. Um, so then I tried to delete sets so I could take those cards and put them in other sets. And then that created a massive glitch where I retired sets, but the cards were so registered, and then it just became such a hassle. I just gave up. I mean, it's like I just don't know how to add my cards to my inventory. I've got a complete Clemente basic set. I got 90% of both Stargell and Maz. I've got, majority. You can see my Hank Aaron and May sets, Aaron especially, very close to having what I need. But I just, like certain cards, you have to either jump through a lot of hoops to try to figure out how to get them registered, or you have to call them, or it's not easy to do. And I wasn't really competing anymore. I wasn't like trying to hit a number like I used to, and just kind of gave up. And that really did. I didn't realize at the time, but keeping the registry up to date and trying to hit numbers did drive my collecting habits. Just like when I was setting up as a dealer and seeing what inventory I needed to make people want to buy cards for my table, that drove how I bought and sold cards. That's and that did change my how I collected to some extent as well. That's when I started my modern pirate collection. Andrew McCutcheon collecting started in 2004. So again, you can see kind of like, oh, McCutcheon became a pirate, and then he came up, and then I kind of was like, oh, well, who's this guy? And he started having great years, and again, so I said around that 2008, 9, 10 range is when I really started looking at modern cards and going back and getting McCutcheon cards and starting my pirate collection. So it all kind of like coalesced where I just completely changed how I did things. And then the registry becoming harder and harder to manage and maintain, and just became such a hassle. I just kind of gave up on a lot of it. So when I say going back to core now, like going back to these maybe not the registry sets. Again, it's still a hassle to kind of get them fixed. And I don't know if I want to put the effort and time into getting every card fixed, because there's cards in these sets that are no longer in my collection. I've either sold them or traded them. There's cards that are registered in other people's sets that I own now that I have to get, delisted from their sets and put into my sets. There's cards and sets that I've retired that I need to figure out how to get them re-registered somehow. So again, there's a lot of work to do if I want to get this all up to date. And I just don't know if I want to put my time and effort into doing that. But I'm thinking about it, just because it was a good way of tracking my progress. And I'm not going to say, I'm going to lie, seeing my rating go up was kind of fun. And I'm competitive, and that's just one of those things that was fun to do. But the other thing about going back to the core is and it should have had a bigger factor than it did, honestly, and I thought it would actually when it happened, was when I got my 60 3D Clemente, a card that I bemoaned and cried about for years, decades maybe, missing out on it multiple times. When I got it, that should have been like the signal, like, okay, now you can go ahead and finish your master sets or your basic sets, again, go back into your core. And it didn't happen that way. And I think the reason why it didn't happen that way when I went and got that card was I gave up a lot for that card. It was kind of like, I would do it again. I'm not going to bemoan not, getting that card. But it's like you look at your collection before and after, and, that was a massive hit to the let's say the diversification of my collection, right? So there was a little bit of like self-reflection about that trade, and just, do I want to go all back into the Clemente side of it, or is that enough? That's I got the big card. I don't need to get any more. That was sort of what I was really doing. I was like, do I need to get any more? Do any of these cards speak to me? Do they make me want to go collect them? Because that was the card that I've always been chasing. And now I have it, but it came at a really high cost to the collection I was building that wasn't Clemente, that I had been working on for a lot of years. I mean, if you think about it, like 15, 16 years, I had been doing something that wasn't my basic, Clemente, Aaron, or sorry, my Clemente and Pirate cards. Even though I finished my Clemente Master set, basic top set, you want to call it, a couple years ago, it was literally one or two cards away. So it was like, just finish that off, but it wasn't like a focus. I wasn't like just, that was all I was trying to do was get those two cards. I ended up, just getting them in the course of time when they came up, and it made sense to buy them. But it wasn't like I was out there every day, feverishly looking for those two cards. It's just, okay, there they are. I got them now. So that's the thing is, like, now I look at my collection and I look at my Stargell collection, missing the 65 Stargell. Like, that just seems like so silly. And that's what I'm talking about a little bit, is kind of what it hurt. What it hurt was I could have had a chance back if I kept going. And again, I've talked about with my modern pirate set, how that was such a financial drain in my collecting budget, buying all those pirate rookies and trying to be the number one pirate modern collector out there, that it just, it took all the resources I would have had for something like building, finishing out my Stargells and my Maz, and getting, maybe the Wayners and, some other players, and really having a world-class vintage pirate set, right, or pirate collection. That was a trade-off. It was 100% the trade-off. Like, I traded my vintage pirate collecting for modern, and it really wasn't worth it. I've got now time to reflect on it. It was just the wrong decision from my personal collecting journey. from a financial standpoint, from everything standpoint. It was just, it wasn't the right thing to do. I should have, it heeded other people's advice, like my father's, my dad, who said that probably wasn't the right thing to do. Just, like dabble in the modern stuff, but make sure you keep a focus on modern. I really didn't. And I look back now, like so many cards are so much more expensive. And that's just how it went. Now I'm going to go back and replace some of those cards or buy some of those cards, and they're going to be so much more expensive than they would have been if I would have just got them when I should have. And just like with my Clementes, because when I look back on my core Clemente collection, the amount of 8.5s, the 1.9 I have, like those cards have, I wouldn't be able to go back and get them again, at least not with any sort of volume, like because they're so expensive now. And that was the downside. Is this is like I could have probably got a few more Honus Wagner cards. I could have got a lot of Wayner cards. I could have got cards that have gotten really expensive now. Some of the really cool, let's say oddball Clemente and Stargell and Maz cards, bazookas and things like that. I could have got some of those cards, Hires Root Beer cards, even though I do have the Maz Hires Root Beer card. But just things like that. I could have got the Hires Root Beer Maze and Aaron back in the day. So it's just that was the cost. It was the wrong decision. So now looking forward to really focusing on the core, but the core has expanded as I've made the journey as a collector. The 90s cards that I collect now are core. 100% core. Like, they'll never not be core now. Just like Chief Bender is core, even though I took a little delay on him as well. He's back in. I just picked up another cool Bender card. Like, they weren't core originally, just like Maze and Aaron weren't. But now my core is expanded. I have a little bit more resources now, so I can expand a little bit. But just because I'm going 90s, for the last couple of years heavy doesn't mean, Griffey and Thomas and all that, doesn't mean that I can't have a bigger core, of cards that I'm collecting. It does take away focus sometimes, and that's one of those things we always struggle with when you have a big core like that. But, there are going to be things I don't collect anymore. I've already, decided, like, for example, like I'm pretty much going to give up basketball completely, like no more basketball. That's out. Um, from a non-sport side of it, I'm really going to stick to DC cards and try not to collect as many Marvel cards like I had been for a lot of those years. A lot of the time on Marvel was on EPAC. That was where I was buying a lot of them. But I think, I'm going to probably sell off a lot of my Marvel cards, sell off my basketball cards, which I've already started that process to some extent. I sold off some of my basketball collection already. So that's going to be the thing, is like I will trim it down and focus it over time. On football, I got to figure out, where I want to go with football. But, again, I might pare that down. So it's like I'm going to pare it down, and get closer to the core, and really want to focus on the sets and the cards I want to keep building, because that's a lot of fun. And I've been having a lot of fun on the Clemente side, with now that I'm, like with Clemente Collector and other people on the vintage side I've been talking to. It's a lot of fun, like having that community and talking to them. And it's just like, yeah, like I've always been in that side of it. It's just sometimes you kind of, get bored. You lose your way. You kind of say, I've been there, done that. I want to do something different, and then you come back. It's kind of like it's kind of like you coming back at home a little bit, and that's what I'm doing. I'm kind of coming back home and realizing this is the happy place for me in terms of collecting. And so it's that journey, right? So I know in the next 5 years I'll probably something else will happen. I'll become an O'Neill Cruz fan or something, and go off on a tangent. It's always going to happen to some extent. But, I do know that I want to really strongly focus on getting some of these basic or some of these sets I've already started done, and get them put to bed so that I can feel good about, starting something new because I finished something. And, a friend of mine said that, like, maybe one of the things you have to do to be more, conscientious about how you go about, getting too broad in your collection is don't start something new till you finish something. So if you finish a set, start a new set. Maybe that's how I need to look at it. Like, I won't start a new set until I finish an older set. And, that might be a good way of saying, look, let's have some focus, get something done, and then move on. So let me know what you guys think about how your collecting journey's gone. Have you gone through lots and lots of different eras in your collection? Do you feel like going back to the core, what you started with, kind of like what you really were focused on early on, is where you are today? Or have you really moved on? Have you gone back? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time on Cards and Comics. Bye.